Welcome to Dauntless Leadership. In today's podcast episode, I've invited experts and friends who helped me sell my business, the Luminations Group. My all-girl deal team included Stephanie Gaffin of SLS Capitol Advisers and Karen Herman of Venable LLP. Really important that everybody hears that as you think about starting a business, and many of us do, that you think about your future success and how to plan early. So what else, Stephanie, should people be thinking about as they start to develop an entrepreneurial organization? Thinking about exit, but also thinking about the story as a whole.
Yeah. So I have two thoughts on this. And I think, first of all, let's go back to, and I love that you remember this, right? Because we talk so often about it's the right story to the right buyer at the right time, right? And so the right story is all about understanding, where does the value really live in the business? And as I think you said, well, I think it's sometimes you need somebody who looks at it from the outside. I would say this is the conversation, one of the most frequent conversations I have with business owners is, gosh, do I even have something to sell? Who would find value in this? And so that's something that we know how to do, is tease out what value lives there. And then you think about, well, who would be interested in that thing of value? So that what's the right story is about, how do we articulate that, and how do we take these amazing companies like the one that you built and really articulate this is why this is valuable, and in a very succinct way bring that forward. The right buyer then is about, how do you find that right match? And as I think we probably talked about early on, it is not necessarily the one with the highest price, right? There's a lot that comes into it in terms of the structure of the deal, which that could be its own podcast, right? But it's also that cultural fit, because you guys are going to be working together. And so understanding what matters to you, and then figuring out who is that right buyer. Is it from the type, is it a financial buyer like a private equity firm? Is it a strategic buyer? Is it an independent? And then really, getting to know and finding that right fit. And then finally, it's the right time. And that has to do with both the external environment as well as the internal environment within the company and what's going on in your own life. But I think it's, when we talk about, do I have something to sell? And, I always say that I used to say it was a Venn diagram between building a great company and building a company that you can sell. I think now having a company you can sell is really a subset of having a great company. There are great companies that just are not going to do well in terms of transaction. And we get this question so often, Lisa, I don't think I've even told you this, that we actually put together an online mini course that's now available on our website about building a business you can sell. And we go through the 7 key elements that you have to look at to understand not just what makes a good company, but what is a buyer going to look for.
I'm going to ask you to list those 7 key elements in a minute.
Yep.
And one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is teaching clients how to tell a story. Tell a story about a brand. Tell a story about a product. In your case, Karen, tell a story about a technology or service that differentiates it and makes it valuable. That's not making stuff up. It's finding the right pieces to put together from an already thriving concern. And I think, again, that's a place where an outside independent observer can say, well, have you looked at it this way? Because sometimes, thick of it, we're just trying to get the work done, make a customer or a client happy. And this is another party, another stakeholder that we may not have thought about. Before we go to the 7 things, and I will, at the end of our podcast, make sure everybody knows how to find the online course and find both of you. Karen, what questions should somebody be asking you as they're assembling a deal team? What kind of things should we be thinking about?
I think there's a couple of things that are important. One is personality. We're going to spend a lot of time together, a lot of time. And by personality, I also mean style. So if your style is more business focused and more practical solution focused, then that you want one type of lawyer. If your style is more, I want to win every single point, no matter the cost to me to win that point, that's a different kind of lawyer. And I think there's a place for both of those types of lawyers. And I've played both of those roles on my deals, depending on what the client wants. But there are certain styles come more naturally to people than others. And I think it will depend, that would depend on if you are just selling your business and exiting completely, you might take a different negotiation point than if you're selling the business and you're going to become an employee of that company for the next 5 years, you might take a whole different negotiation stance. So I think one thing is just to talk about style and process. You know, when you're hiring a lawyer, are you getting the lawyer you're talking to? Are you getting an associate? Are you getting somebody else? Does that law firm have the right expertise? I cannot do a deal by myself. I have to have a tax lawyer, an estate planning lawyer in some cases. I have to have an IP lawyer. I have to have sometimes a trademark lawyer, often an employment lawyer. Just all sorts. There's sometimes 20, 30 timekeepers on any deal because there's subject matter specialists that come in, privacy specialists. If you process credit cards, how do you process credit cards? Do you comply with the PCI standards? Those sorts of things the buyer's going to be asking about, and you need a deal team that can field responses to those questions and field them quickly. So I think most style, it's sort of substance, and it's just the team. Just what is that? Is it a team you're comfortable with?
That was really important. We did not only spend a lot of time together, we spent a lot of time together after 11 o'clock at night. And so,
morning.
yes, right, exactly.
Girls Club with wine. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, we did. We even had our toast together. So, stepping back for a minute, when I was fortunate enough to meet Stephanie and Mark and also Karen and put together a deal team that I hoped would help me get to a successful exit, I definitely thought about enjoying the interaction with them, knowing we would have to work hard. That was important. I also pictured this someday in the future, 3 women talking to women leaders and women entrepreneurs that would make sure to say, you can do this. This is something that we or somebody can help you achieve. And I felt, you said it, Karen, you've only had a few women entrepreneurs. And Stephanie, we're just kind of on the cusp of the generation of women that will sell their business. How, now that I've sold my business, can I help other women feel comfortable with the process? And so there's really nothing that makes me happier than being able to have this conversation, although it's probably a year or two longer than I thought it would take to get here. On that note, before we go to what fits into the story, maybe talk to me about, were there things that I did particularly right or particularly wrong that you remember that you wish at that point you could have told me that we want to tell other people now?
Sure, I'll chime in. So I think one thing, Lisa, that you did really well is you were very clear on why you were selling your business and what mattered most to you. So, you know, if I can share that, right? So one of the things that was most important to you was that you had some things you really wanted to move on to with your teaching and some of your other passions. And so for you, that time frame that you would be required to stay was really important. And so that became a critical factor as we evaluated different opportunities and, you know, and different options that presented themselves. And so that's one example where I think you had a really clear view, and that was helpful, because if you don't know your criteria, how do you evaluate different offers that have different structures and different time horizons and different relationships, and right, and you feel like this is not apples and oranges, this is apples and tomatoes sometimes, right? So I think that's something that you did really well. I think one thing, and you would not be alone in this, but I think you'd be disappointed in me if I didn't come up with here's something. But there were times that I think that it becomes easy to get fixated on one point and we lose the forest for the trees. I would say every client that we work with has those points. And that's part of my job and Karen's job, is to be able to come in and say, okay, let's come back to that big picture. Is this still fundamentally a good deal? Does this still accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? And if so, let's figure out a way past this point. What was that, Lisa? Do you think that's a fair?
Yeah, I have a longer list of things I wish I would have done differently and better, and already learned a few today. One of the things, and by the way, the situation has changed since the acquisition of the Luminations Group. Not only did I want to be able to teach more and exit from the company, but I also wanted to be able to teach and be open about it while I was still working with the company. So I needed a partner who would say, if that's something that's important to you, run your business with us, but also keep teaching your digital marketing classes, which I did do. And in particular, during the pandemic, had the opportunity to do even more because it was virtual. So that was right. The other thing I think I didn't realize, and I wanted to share with people, is I knew culture fit was important. Just like Karen said, culture fit for the team is important, but that's a finite period of time. Culture fit with you and your new company could be longer. And so really evaluating what do they see as a vision for you and how you're going to integrate down the road. Let me say that again. Really evaluating that culture fit to make sure, not just short term, but longer term, your organization fits with their organization. And if you're staying, your management style fits with their management style. So integration is successful. That's important, really important to think about. Worth a lot of money. Another thing that was really important to me was making sure I could bring along everybody who was working for the Luminations Group who wanted to come. And some of the people that we talked with were not crystal clear on how that would happen. And others were, if you can make it work financially, you can bring everybody you want. That was super important to me and still is today. And I'm proud to say that we really haven't lost anybody in the past couple of years, other than people who have decided to go back to work full time. And my business model is a part-time, flexible one. Karen, anything you think that I did particularly badly or particularly well that you want to talk about?
You projected confidence throughout the entire project. You never failed to push, and you never rolled over and said, oh, well, I'm not going to push that point because I'm not going to get it. Even when I told you you're not going to get it, you still pushed. And sometimes you got more than we thought you were going to get. And other times we may not have gotten that point, but the fact that you were pushing got us other points. So, and telling us from the very beginning what you wanted to do besides work for the buyer was super important when it came time for me to negotiate your non-competition agreement, because I was able to negotiate out, teaching is not going to be competitive. So we were able to very clearly draw lines in the sand as to what would and wouldn't be, because I never want to finish up a deal and then turn out 6 months later, have you call me and say, oh, they're suing me for this or that, or we're unhappy. I like to finish a contract, sign it, put it in my drawer, and never look at it again, ever. I don't like the litigators. I love all my litigators in my firm. I'm joking. I do not like having to call them to say, oh, there's a dispute, or there's this, or there's that, because that's not a great transaction. It happens. Trust me, it happens. But when someone's as clear as you were, it happens far, far less.
So setting clear goals and portraying confidence. And by the way, there were plenty of times where after I got off the Zoom or walked out of the room, I was not really that confident. And that's something else that I want to make sure comes across in Dauntless Leadership. Fake it till you make it, right? It's an easier thing for some people to do than others. chances are good you're really good at what you do. You got to show people that.
And this isn't something that I would say that you did wrong, because I don't think you did it wrong, but I see a lot of entrepreneurs doing it wrong. So I'm going to just flag it before we move on off this topic. And part of this is planning as well, going back to our earlier conversation. But one thing that you should never lose sight of is your employees. And you've sort of hit on it, because culture is super important. And it's very important to understand how the buyer is going to treat your employees. You're going to give them the same type of vacation days, the same level of benefits. Those are important. But it's also important for you to establish, if you want to, some sort of financial reward for the employees, especially long-term employees who have stuck it out with you. It's fine to give them, transaction bonuses and the like at the time of closing. All of this comes out of your pocket, right? If you're the entrepreneur and you own all the shares, everything that goes to the employees comes out of your pocket. But a lot of times it just starts to show good morale, and it's thankfulness and gratitude. And the buyers appreciate that. The buyers appreciate when they see employees with options, or they see employees with profit sharing rights, or they see employees with transaction bonuses, because it shows that the people that they're buying, the founders that they're buying, because really when you're buying a business, you're buying the people, right? I mean, that's, unless there's a patented technology, it's really the people. And when the people that they're buying care about each other and they treat each other fairly and with respect, and the founders want to reward those who help them build the business and keep it going. And a lot of times the buyers will sometimes even match those bonuses and say, if you stay another year, we'll give you another bonus to continue to reward those folks that helped build the business that's coming across, and help with integration, which is exhausting, right? Integration is exhausting. Even more so than doing the deal, perhaps.
And I've learned a lot over the past couple of years about what to do and what not to do in integration. Whole other conversation, but something probably worth having a conversation about down the road. I think you're right. Not losing sight of people is really important. And it's easy to do when it's your business. It's your baby. One of the great things about the Market Performance Group is they actually looked at some of the benefits we were offering, like unlimited vacation, and converted their whole company to that same benefit structure. So that was a great win. Other things we do differently, but we dipped our toe in the water before we went all the way there. And spoiler alert, it's 3 years almost to the day since we did this deal. And I still work full time for the Market Performance Group. And that's because I'm continuing to learn. There's really smart people in the organization. And I have been able to retain the talented team that I'd like to surround myself with. It's not going to last forever, but it's certainly longer than we imagined when we were doing the deal. Just looking now at a few more questions that I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to make sure we answered. One is, we worked really, really hard to get where we are. And by really hard, I mean, I did it in the consumer packaged goods world. You did in investment banking. And there is more today of a perception that you work to live, not live to work. And I see this in the younger people I hire and in my students. So how do you become successful when you're not working 24 hours a day and staying at night in the office? And what do you think you miss if you don't do that? And I'm going to ask each of you to talk about that. Stephanie, you first, then Karen, if we can.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's very challenging about being in a deal-focused world is that the timing is extremely unpredictable, and it is largely out of your control. We are right now in the, knock on wood, the very late stages of a deal, and it becomes challenging for me to do anything else, because when that question comes in, when that issue comes up, it needs to be dealt with immediately. And so that makes it, it makes it very intense. It makes it challenging to plan, right? I think, sure, I can go to that event next week, and then the deal pushes back by a week, and all of a sudden, right, I have to make those trade-offs. Now, I think what is I think about a younger generation that I do think is doing a much better job of thinking about their whole life. I think it's, a couple of things. I actually just talked about this on a class that I was teaching, because as I said, you've inspired me, and now I'm teaching as well, of this concept of leader as a catalyst, and thinking about where do I need to place my attention and focus in a way that I can differentiate. And there are going to be times that, yeah, I'm on the phone with the client and the attorney, and it is 1 o'clock in the morning, and no, we're not kidding, because we're trying to solve an issue and it's got to get solved. But then there's going to be another day that I say, you know what, right now there's nothing happening. And so I am going to take the afternoon. I'm going to go take my kayak out on Lake Michigan, because, right now I can do that. So I think there is the opportunity. And if you're working for a firm that's able to do that, I own my own firm, so I'm able to do that, and to take that flexibility, right? So I think that that's part of the trade-off is, can you trade that intensity and unpredictability for then being able to take the breather in the times when it's not as intense?
Even if you're more junior, even if you're a couple years out of university, or
it's, again, I think this is going to go back to the question of culture. I think it's harder, right? I think the and that's where what I would encourage is ask that question. M&A, as Karen said earlier, it's a really exciting world. I love the fact that I get to help business owners, through a transaction that makes a huge difference in their life. So it can be incredibly rewarding. And part of it, you're going to have to learn. I think it's in those tough moments, and when you are working a ton of hours, part of what you're getting is you're getting the experience, right? You're getting the exposure, so that then down the road, you can say, look, we're stuck on this point in a deal. And I can think back and say, all right, what are some ways that we've solved this before? Or how can we address this? Or, right, to be able to work those through. But just the question, it's harder when you're more junior.
It's harder when you're more junior, and I've said that, and that I like that you use the word intensity versus just busting your what, because the fact of the matter is there are intense times and there are less intense times in any jobs. But those intense moments for me weren't just learning, they were also forging relationships, because you're in the trenches with somebody. And those are relationships that, to this day, those people are my consultants or my clients. And I would hate for somebody to miss out on that opportunity.
Yep.
Karen, how about you?
Yeah, I'm addressing this on a daily basis. I am the practice group chair of my regional practice. So I manage about 8 associates. All but 2 of them have kids. And so I'm, trying to help them figure out a path forward, right? Is when I was growing up, there were no female M&A partners with kids. I mean, if there were, I never met them. So now I would like to create some female M&A partners with kids, and I have to create the circumstances and the environment for that to happen. So I give them probably 3 pieces of advice. One, you guys have already touched on: intentionality. Just figure out what your day holds and what the most important thing is, and get that done. And maybe the most important thing is making sure your baby recovers from her flu so that you can be full speed next week. And maybe it's not doing just busy work at the office. And maybe the next day, the most important thing is getting that diligence report done, because you did help your baby recover all day yesterday. So figuring out what the most important thing is for every day and doing that with intention is important. I also tell them to travel. Go away. Take your phone. Take an iPad. If you want to take a laptop, take something. Check in, and when you need to, work for 15 minutes every 4 hours or whatever it takes. Work before your kids wake up in the hotel room. Work after they go to bed in the hotel room. But do not necessarily just skip your life. I closed a deal on the back of a boat, the back seat of a boat in Costa Rica, on a call because my family was going, and I went, and I was supposed to get the deal closed on the 30th of March, and we left on April 2nd. But of course, it didn't close. So we closed it. I closed it from the back seat of a boat that I had my laptop. There's pictures of me balancing with my laptop. And I remember every deal like that, right? And we got it done, and the client was perfectly happy. That the client ever knew I wasn't in the office, frankly. So you don't really ever I don't put an out of office on, because I'm going to respond, and I don't necessarily need to advertise where I am at any given moment. I may be at a conference in New York. I may be on vacation. I may be at my office. I may be at home. I don't think people need to know where I am, as long as I'm constantly connected. And then the third piece of advice I would give you, and this is just a motto I have, and I'll have to explain this. It's offer no resistance. So no, I don't mean say no. Don't ever say no, because obviously you should say no to certain things. But I mean that if, for example, I've spent all weekend drafting of the most perfect stock purchase agreement that I've ever drafted, and then on Tuesday, the tax lawyers say, we shouldn't do this as a stock deal. We should do this as an asset deal. So I have to spend all night Tuesday night, literally all night Tuesday night, turning a perfect stock purchase agreement into an asset purchase agreement. I can do that one of two ways, right? I can either complain about it in my head and be upset and text all my friends and say, I can't believe this tax lawyer did this to me. This client or this partner, whoever is doing this to me. And then that really sucks your energy. Or you can say, well, I got to do it anyway. I might as well just don't resist it, just do it. And then it turns out I get it done at 2:00 in the morning and I get to sleep, as opposed to getting it done at 5:00 in the morning and I'm grumpy the whole next day. So I find that if you just accept what comes along and accept that disappointment is sometimes going to come with this business, it just is. You're going to miss something. You're going to have to redo something. You're going to work hours you didn't mean to work. And if you just don't resist it, if you just accept it and go along with the flow, it makes it a lot easier and a lot more fun.
I agree. Attitude and gratitude, right? Both matter a lot in loving what you do. And I think that's something that all three of us have in common. My company was started 25 years ago now to help women work part-time flexibly, but do really meaty strategic work. And every day, even if I have a bad day, I think about the fact that there are hundreds of women that I've helped do that over the last 20 plus years. And I'm grateful that I could, even if somebody's asking for something ridiculous that moment. So I think that's really good advice. Stephanie, I want to go back to the 7 things, and then I have 2 more questions for each of you.
Yeah. So first of all, at a high level, everything to me about building a business that you can sell is grounded in you have to have something that survives you. Right. I would say that's one of the biggest things that we find is, and Lisa, you remember we had this probably one of our first conversations, right? We were teasing out how much of the business was you and how much of it was something that survives you, because for someone to buy it, they need to buy something that can survive beyond the founder or the current owner, even if they're not the founder. So what we look at, and Karen, I'll love to get your perspective on these, right? So the first thing then is the employees. And this is a key piece of, is there somebody other than you who can do the work? So that there's a continuity beyond the founder. The second one then is the operations and processes, right? So is this something where we're inventing something new every time, or is there actually a way that the business runs? And so that there's a set, it's underlying operations that again starts to create something that is an ongoing entity that can move forward. It's replicable, right? We look at it and say there's reliability in the product or the service or whatever it is. The third thing then is the intellectual property. And as you can imagine, in some kinds of companies, this is a huge deal, but in every company it matters. Have you protected the name? Have you protected, right? And so understanding, do we own the intellectual property? And I see those as inputs then to what's really, to me, at the core, which is the customers. And a buyer is going to look at customers a little bit differently than you think of them just in your own business. So they're going to look at, do we have longevity? Do we have long-term contracts? Do we have an overweighting with a single customer or a single group of customers, right? So I'm looking at, again, that reliability, because again, a buyer's looking at what they're doing today and historically as an indicator of what the company can do going forward. So that customer piece becomes really important. That then generates the last three, which is how much revenue do you have? What is the profitability? And then finally, what's the opportunity for growth? So again, a buyer is buying this because they believe that they can do something, that they can grow it beyond what it is today. And so to be able to show that there's an opportunity to scale in the same or adjacent areas.
That's great. That's really important, succinct info for every business owner, every business manager to think about, even if it's a brand within a multi-billion-dollar company. Those are exactly the things they should be thinking about, but it might not be a founder or an owner. It might be the current team, or it might be the current items in the line. Question for both of you. What does Dauntless mean to you? And do you have any advice for emerging women leaders? And I'll go to Karen. What does Dauntless mean to you? And then do you have advice that we should be sharing with emerging leaders, and particularly emerging women leaders?
I guess being brave, not taking no for an answer, but not listening to people who say you can't do it.
So say it over and say Dauntless means.
Okay, hold on. Okay, I'll start over. So I guess to me, Dauntless means being brave, not listening to the people who say that you can't do it, not believing that you don't have what it takes. I guess that's what it means to me. And as far as what advice I would give to women leaders or emerging women leaders, it would be just, just keep at it, right? Don't give up. Obviously there's areas and times and places where if something's not working out, like you said, Lisa, something's just not working out, maybe it's time to don't throw good money after bad, call it quits. But for the most part, it's just a bump, right? It's just something that if you just keep pushing, you're almost through it. Success is just around the corner. And I think if you're dauntless and you just continue to push forward, even in spite of the negativity, in spite of people thinking like you're not being successful as you should be, getting past some of this fear of how we're being perceived by others, and just pushing forward.
Thank you. Stephanie, same question.
Yeah, so I think to me, Dauntless is pushing forward, not in the absence of doubt, not in the absence of fear, but it is pushing forward past the doubt, past the fear, past the obstacles. It is knowing what it is that you want to achieve and being determined that you're going to figure out a way to get there. It is, Karen, I think this is what you were just saying, right? It's not that, and I think about the character of Rebecca Welton in Ted Lasso, right? Who I think is just a phenomenal example of this. And for any of you who've watched the series, and the exercise that she does in front of the mirror to build herself up, right? It's that thought of, I know where I'm going and I'm going to figure it out. Right. And again, very much what Karen was just saying, I'm going to push forward. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Matter of fact, it's probably going to be hard, but it's that determination to figure it out. And I think the advice that I would give along those lines is don't sell yourself short, right? Like I think it becomes too easy to say, look, somebody else, others who've done this, they must be smarter than me, or they must be, braver than me, or they must be more confident than I am. And I think, Lisa, just as you said, after you sometimes you hung up on the Zoom and then, you held it together. You had that great confidence during the Zoom, and then we hang up, and then we're like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And we all do that, and to recognize that we all do that. And I think that's where, women very often will, they'll put forward what they want, and then they'll say, is that okay? Well, no, don't ask if it's okay. That's what you want. So don't sell yourself short.
Excellent. Anything that I didn't give either of you the opportunity to talk about that I want to make sure is on the podcast for you, please feel free to jump in. Can you each say, if you want to reach me, here's how, and I'll make sure that comes across. Can you start, Stephanie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's not something we didn't talk about, but the thing I would reiterate is start earlier than you think you should, right? Start while your business is strong. Recognize that it is going to take a while to sell your company so that you find that right buyer. And there's, depends on the type of business, but it is very likely that there will be a transition period of not just a few months, but it may be a year or a few years. And so start earlier than you think. It's much better to start the conversation and decide, yeah, actually, I'm going to wait another year to get XYZ and, get my ducks in a row, and then I'll go out to market. But if you don't start the conversation, I would say way more common that I talk to somebody who wishes they had started earlier than somebody who thinks that they did it too soon. So start earlier than you think. And, always happy to have a conversation with folks about questions about your business, about what it looks like to sell your business. Easiest way to find us, go to our website at slscapitoladvisers.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn at Stephanie Gaffin, or my email is sgaffin@slscapitoladvisers.com.
Thank you. Karen.
I think the only thing I would say again is just what Stephanie said, but maybe for a different reason. Start as early as you can, including by making sure you have a good tax advisor early in the process, somebody that's doing your tax returns. One of the biggest diligence things that I see kills deals is tax non-compliance. And it's innocent sometimes. The tax code is very complicated. It's not like you would go off and try not to file correct tax returns, but if the buyer discovers something that's incorrect, it can be either a significant special escrow, or it can actually blow up a deal. There's other sort of legal pitfalls like that we could talk about in a different podcast, but things to make sure you're doing correctly is important. And the faster you get someone in there to do sort of I would call it an assessment, not an audit, but to do sort of a due diligence assessment to say, am I doing this right? If I do have an employee option plan, is it compliant with the IRS tax code? Is it, those sorts of questions that are easy to fix in advance, and it is harder to fix once the buyer's discovered it. If you discover it, you can fix it. The buyer discovers it, you have a whole nother level of complexity. I would also say that if there are any kind of warts of the business, any kind of flaws that you have identified, it's better not to hide them. It's better to tell the bankers right up front, I have this is great, except this one employee is not performing. We may have to let him go between now and selling. Is that okay? Or, we can help. We've seen everything. There's nothing that's going to surprise us. And so we can help you get over any sorts of perceived flaws, and maybe they're fine, right? Maybe they're not even flaws. You just think of them as flaws. But that's another reason just to get the advisors in early on in the process. I am also always happy to talk to folks as early as possible. Like Stephanie, we court businesses for years before we ever get a deal from them. So happy to do that. I'm also on LinkedIn, Karen C. Herman. I use my middle initial. And on my firm email is kcherman, 2 N's, at venable.com. Venable is Venable.
Thank you. Having this conversation makes me want to start another business so I can sell it with you guys again soon. So stay tuned.
It'd be awesome. We'd love to.
Thank you for being with me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. A lot of great nuggets for people. And I know we'll be working together again soon. One of the things that clearly comes across with our guests is the pivot. People have changed careers and have loved their next step. So it's perfectly appropriate to close with the immortal words of my mom, Arlene Barnett, who said, "You don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, just what you want to do next." What does dauntless mean to you? To me, dauntless means being brave, being bold, not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite the fear. And this happens in work and in life. And I hope our podcast will help make that a little easier for everybody.